What's up, cats and dogs? This episode is sponsored by sugar-free mints. Delicious and 0 calories. Keep that breath smelling fresh and grab yourself a mint. On this episode, we highlight an exciting young researcher named Fink, who's doing important work at the intersection of music and biology. That's right. Lauren's an impressive scholar, perhaps even a rising star in her field, which you could categorize as the neuroscience of music. Her PhD, I believe, is in neuroscience, but one thing she really works a lot with is eye tracking and understanding what's going on in the eye when we are listening to music. And let me tell you, folks, there's a lot more going on than you might suppose here, which we will get into. In addition, she explores cool new tools and exotic scientific instruments like an adaptive metronome machine. She and her boss call it a groove enhancement machine. Machines like this help a group of people sync up around a beat. This kind of work is really cool because we know when people are in synchrony, that group performs better at all kinds of things. They act nicer to one another, they're more clear-headed individually. The machine she describes is one new way of helping people do that. You know, Ali G once asked Donald Trump in an interview on the Ali G show,
what is the most popular thing in the world?
Music.
No.
Tell me.
Ice cream.
Okay.
Everyone has it. And what is the problem with ice cream?
I have no idea.
It drips.
Okay.
Well, Ali G goes on from there to try to sell the Don on a business idea with ice cream gloves that protect your hands from getting all sticky or cold when you're eating ice cream, eating on that cream. But that's not really what I want to bring out of this. What I want to bring out is that if even a clown like Donald MFing Trump can recognize the universality of music, the appeal it has to everyone, there must be something to it. Who the hell doesn't love music? It's music, baby. It's music that brings us all together, music that's so easy to love, music that's so cool to study and fascinating when you get into it, and how it affects us in so many ways that we don't even know, how it shakes us down to our core, in our bones, and in our eyeballs. So, with that, I think we ought to get this one rolling. Thanks, Lauren. I wish you all the best. Did an amazing interview. Take us away.
Yeah, I usually start by just saying I study how music affects the nervous system, like everything from sort of large-scale interpersonal synchronization to very small-scale things, like looking at eye movements when people are listening to music.
And what have you found when it comes to, how would you describe the effects on the nervous system that you found so far?
Yeah, a few cool things that I'm sort of excited about. There was previously a fairly, a small by any standards, but like growing body of research showing that music will induce spontaneous motor behavior at, this is fancy, like prominent periodicities, but basically we just think of the beat, like what you might bob your head to in the music. So things like the beat or other sort of important timing related events in the music, right? That you would start to see like spontaneous head bobbing or foot tapping, like this sort of stuff just happens to you automatically and kind of unconsciously. And so coming from an interest in that literature, what I've found in my research is that also seems to be true for the pupil of your eye. So most people don't think of that as a motor behavior because it's like, it's not muscle that you can consciously control, but it is smooth muscle. So the pupil is just a hole in the center of your eye. It's controlled by the smooth muscle of the iris. And what we see is that the pupil changes size, so it's oscillating in size in time with the rhythm of the music. And so this is a kind of really cool finding that I was excited about, and then has, kind of a few other implications or applications. And so what we kind of that first we sort of showed just that as a concept that happens, that you can see this. It's called entrainment, when one behavior synchronizes to an external stimulus. So you would say that like the pupil entrains to music. So now that that was happening, that's cool, and that's sort of just a physiological thing. But then the next step with that was to be like, is this at all predictive of listeners' engagement with the music or their experience of the music? So, at first our studies were just kind of playing like pretty simple rhythms and just seeing if we found this entrainment. And now what we've been doing is having people listen to, like popular music from a range of genres. So, like everything from classical, like Shostakovich, to jazz, like Miles Davis, to hip hop. There's some like DJ Crush in this stimulus set. There's like a huge range, like reggae. There's a ton of stuff. And people just listen for like about a minute. And then after they're done, they sort of rate how much they liked it or how absorbed they felt in the music. And absorbed is kind of one of these hot topics at the moment, of like kind of feeling one with the music, or feeling kind of carried away by it, or just like this kind of focused, pleasurable attention to the music. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what we're trying to do then is see like if from people's pupil we could predict how absorbed they would feel in the music. And it turns out we can do that with like around 70% accuracy. And it's basically, oscillatory activity in the pupil that's predicting these subjective experiences. So I think that was like an important next step in this line of research, to show that it's not just like, a physiological thing that happens that's like maybe interesting but maybe not, but that it's like this physiological phenomenon that is related to subjective experience.
Yeah, that's so cool. So, the pupil's sort of bobbing along. Is it getting smaller and bigger, like pulsating like a little jellyfish, or what does it look?
Exactly. Yeah, I actually have a really cool video I could send you of it. I mean, it's the oscillations are somewhat slow. So like in the video, whenever I'm demoing this to people, the video's like sped up at 5 times the speed, so you could like see it a little bit better.
Uh-huh.
The oscillations are generally in like the 1 to 2 hertz range, which is sometimes where the beat of the music is, or sometimes it would be like every fourth beat, like kind of the bar level of the music. So yeah,
Wow.
that's sort of what's going on.
Wow, I love that. So, people's pupils moving is predictive of their subjective experience of when you ask them how absorbed were you during that song.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's definitely, we think it's, like reflecting their attention to the kind of rhythmic structure of the music, but then also that it's kind of like the amount. This is again a fancy term, but like phase locking. If you just think of that, like how tightly coupled the pupil is with the music, that's basically what's predicting their like subjective experience, like how much they liked it or how absorbed they felt, is kind of like how tightly coupled these two signals, the music and the pupil, are.
I see. And you said about 70% predictive was this number.
Yeah, that's where we're at now. There's, a few other things we could probably do, and that I'm still kind of working on to like improve that accuracy. But yeah, I mean, even that though is pretty good for like a signal as small as the pupil and this sort of physiological data.
Yeah, yeah. What other sorts of markers in whether it's something on the body or something do people use to predict this absorption or being oneness with the music? Are there other, or is like heart rate or just
Mhm.
sort of like foot tapping? Does that make its way into these predictive models?
Yeah, it definitely can. There was a paper. One of my collaborators wrote a paper about microsaccade rate predicting absorption. And do you know what microsaccades are?
Is that like the little darting of the eyes?
Yeah, well, saccades are like, when you make an eye movement, but then microsaccades are, it's like when you're fixating, this idea of, well, I mean, people say fixating, but it's kind of like your eyes are never still. So even when you think you're looking like straight at an object and kind of foveating it or staring at it, a lot of the time your eyes are still making little movements, even though they appear to be still. So those are the little movements that you make while foveating something are called microcycles. So anyway, people have looked at that in terms of absorption, and that's a friend of mine. So that's sort of how I got into this stuff. But then, other also the PI of the lab I worked in during grad school had looked at this idea of being in the groove, which is maybe a little bit different than being absorbed, in that it tends to also involve, like, you could be absorbed maybe just by laying down and listening to music, whereas typically people talk about being in the groove involving like an urge to move with the music. So for that's when people look at, like, use motion capture to look at full body movement, sort of like what you're saying, like head bobbing or finger tapping or
Yeah.
synchronization between people, that sort of stuff.
That's so cool. That phrase, being in the groove, did I see that you all, there's a groove enhancement machine? I was looking on your website.
Yeah. That's my other big project at the moment. Yeah, so I have this eye tracking stuff, and then the main other thing I've been working on is this groove enhancement machine.
That's sick. That's great. Tell
Yeah,
us
do you
about
want to
it.
hear more about that?
Yeah, we'd love to.
Okay. I guess so. The kind of the basic idea there was that making music together is an activity that people tend to really enjoy, but some people just aren't very good at keeping time. Or rather, I should say, the barrier to entry to a pleasurable musical experience is relatively high. Like, maybe it requires a lot of training, or people just feel like they're not good enough to, like, really sit down and enjoy music making together. So the idea was that we'd make this adaptive device that would adapt to the skill levels of the players, and then therefore sort of make this group music making easier from the start. And also underlying the motivation for this project is a fair amount of research now showing that when people interact together in motor synchrony, they're more likely to feel bonded to each other, to trust each other, to want to donate money. So the idea here was to ask if we can enhance that experience of feeling one with the group, or, having an enjoyable music making experience by using this adaptive device.
That helps the people sync up and helps the less experienced people kind of catch on.
Yeah, exactly. And so right now it's like in a very basic form, and there's a lot of ways we could build it out in the future, but this was sort of like a first proof of concept. And so basically right now what it is a metronome. Do you know what a metronome is?
I don't think I have a definition for that.
Yeah. So and I figure a lot of people don't. So a metronome, like, for musicians, it's something you always practice with. It's just a device that keeps steady time. So I'm going to just tap on my mic. It would just be something that's going like, and so as a musician, you're practicing with that and making sure that you're keeping good time. So what we do in the lab, what our device does is it acts as a metronome, and we tell people, okay, you're going to hear this metronome clicking, and your task is to synchronize with it. We bring in groups of 4 people to do this. And sometimes it's just a normal metronome and we don't adapt it at all. But other times what we're doing is we're taking the group average of how off they were compared to the metronome. So for every click, we calculate the discrepancy between when they tapped and when the metronome clicked, and we can average those and then adaptively change the timing of the next click. So in real time, we're changing the rate of not the rate, but the phase of the metronome. And so these experiments, we did that at a bunch of different adaptivity levels, basically. So we take the average and then say they were on average 100 milliseconds off collectively. Then sometimes we'd adjust by like 25% of that. So the next click would be like 25 milliseconds later. Sometimes we'd adapt by like 50%. So the next click would be 50 milliseconds later, right? Or 75% or 100%. And basically what we can show is that when you adapt by, say, like 25 to 50%, you can nudge people into more synchrony than they're otherwise capable of when we're not adapting. And that we ask them, like, how in the groove did they feel and how connected to the group did they feel and stuff like that. And they definitely report feeling more connected and in the groove. And they don't, especially at the lower levels of adaptivity, like when we're only adapting by 25%, this is like barely audible to them because it's not shifting so much. So they also don't report like feeling like the metronome was moving Whereas if you at like 100% adaptivity, right, you can really tell that each click is kind of shifting around, and that isn't as pleasant for people. And also, so basically we could kind of nudge people into both states. Like, it's really frustrating to be in these overly adaptive conditions,
Mm,
which
right.
you can kind of imagine. I mean, you could think of, sometimes when we're talking about this, we use the analogy of like when you're talking to someone or trying to do something with someone else, and they're just kind of like being too adaptive to what you want, or like
Uh-huh.
overly, whereas this is kind of like, yeah, so we
Uh-huh.
could definitely put you in that sort of state, or have you in this sort of optimally adaptive, in the groove, sort of just where it's easy to keep time. And it would just be like someone kind of being sensitive to your needs, but not too sensitive, right? Like, just you don't even notice that they're sort of adjusting. So that's
Uh-huh.
this other big project, and there's still a lot to do with that, but it's cool that we've like shown this very basic result is
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. And you said it was in the sort of proof of concept stage. Or how many of these machines are there right now? Is there the one that you all use, or I bet they're pretty expensive to make these?
Well, that's the thing. They're actually super cheap. So we built this all on Arduino circuit boards. They're like one of these, like microcontrollers, like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, but even more simple. So it's called Arduino, and it's they're like $25 to buy one, and then we buy another little circuit board from Adafruit to put on top that allows us to play sound. So in total, the system is comprised of 5 of those setups. So maybe like $150 to $200 to build the whole thing. So it's like one central Arduino that's connected to 4 other Arduinos that are each connected to tap pads. So all of this is running on these baby circuit boards, which are super low latency in terms of timing. So like when you tap on this little force sensitive resistor that we give you to tap on, like it's immediately registered, and we could do all these adaptations within like 3 milliseconds, which is totally imperceptible to you as the time it takes, this time shift. Whereas an earlier version of this that my boss had been working on was just one person, and the adaptive metronome was implemented on a computer. And with a computer, the latency was like 60 milliseconds, and you had to account for that. And it was all like just much more clunky. So we're pretty happy that we were able to build it on these small circuit boards. And for that same reason, it would be super scalable. But at the moment, there's only our system at UC Davis, and then we had been collaborating with some people at Stanford. So there's also one system at Stanford, but they haven't. I think the idea there was to use it in more of an educational setting, but nothing has really happened there yet. So
Uh-huh. But it sounds like it could, given how scalable and sort of easy to put together. That's awesome. I wouldn't have guessed that um, for around $100 you could have something that could go into schools. Or is that where schools or bands could use these as they're hanging out, friends making music?
yeah, exactly. I mean, you could think of it as definitely as a music education tool. I think like another, my PI likes to sometimes say, like, imagine if, people making really important decisions, like say like the board of some important company, like just sat down and did this together, like tapped together for a minute in these optimally adaptive conditions, they would be kind of much more aligned and synchronized with each other and in a better state to like make these really important choices. So, I mean, you could like, I don't know, it would have to like, you'd have to have buy-in from people, right, to do it. And I guess I see myself as being more on like the basic research side of things, and it would be sort of someone else's job to come up with how they want to use this. But
Right.
like, there's definitely a lot of options. It could even be like a game sold on at the supermarket, right, to like kids who want to, but like, who knows?
Yes, yes. It is so fun to think about where it goes. I love the boardroom idea, the a bunch of people in dress clothes, having a little drum circle
Yeah, exactly.
before going down. Or even like, I mean, yeah, you mentioned how there's this body of work that we know when people are kind of syncing up like this, it just sort of has all these positive effects on the group. Like uh, I just think of like going to a high school volleyball game and they're all warming up to the same song and getting pumped up together, like
Yeah.
sports teams or.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's all these ways that we do this socially, like exactly what you're saying. Like using music as a warm-up. Or I mean, there's been some nice studies showing too that it doesn't have to be music, right? Like even just walking together in synchrony will like increase your bonding with people. But the difference here is that we're saying like, can we enhance that, like by adapting to people's asynchrony? Can we like nudge you into a better an even more synchronous state with someone? So yeah, there's definitely plenty of ways without an adaptive device that you can sort of try to get at these states. But yeah, we're interested in, I guess, these other fringe cases where you might want to enhance it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so cool. Well, can I ask a question about something else I saw on your website? And this is that class that you designed uh, under about not This Is Your Brain on Music, but This Is Your Brain on Beyonce.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I've actually taught that class. I mean, so on my website, just sort of like a teaching portfolio there, like, this is the kind of course I would like to teach and would be prepared to teach. And I think this highlights something that is really important to me. And like, obviously, we're on a podcast for the general public too. Like, so the reason or the idea behind this course is this book. There's a book called This Is Your Brain on Music by Daniel Levitin, and he's a neuroscience researcher who does similar research to what I've been talking to you about, only like of course he's been in the field like way longer than me and does way cooler stuff. But um, it was his book called This Is Your Brain on Music that I read in high school, and what totally inspired me to go into neuroscience in the first place. So I think that's so important that scientists, try to communicate to the general audience, and you sort of never know who you might inspire to do something. And so that book is pretty accessible, I would say, though. I mean, there are some difficult segments, or it's a little bit challenging, and definitely like the science is there. So the idea would be maybe for this course to be like a freshman seminar type thing that would expose the students both to like the basic neuroscience underlying music, but then also do like a really in-depth kind of musicological approach to analyzing um, Beyonce's Lemonade album, which at the time of me developing this course for like a teaching seminar I was in, that was when the visual album had just come out. So I was like, really excited about it. But I think that's a really nice example, because also that I do like stuff connecting sound with vision, like eye movements and stuff like that. It seems really cool to, be able to have both the auditory and visual components and to talk about how those two interact. And so the idea would be to kind of go through each track on the album and each chapter of the book and make connections between the two, and then of course also bring in like larger cultural narratives around
Mm.
music and like current political issues even, and like it just kind of like the kind of thing that you would want a freshman seminar to be like, just kind of start getting people to think critically about the world they live in and how things work.
Yeah, that's the perfect idea. And I remember when that album came out, that was a big deal because of all of these connected reasons, political commentary, and I know there's a lot of like women's empowerment themes in that album are supposed to be. I haven't listened to it very much, but yeah, that seems like just to get people excited and interested.
Yeah, I mean, I guess now if it were to be taught, I should switch to like Lizzo's album or like the new
Right.
Billie Eilish album. But I do think it's nice to have the visual component. I guess maybe Janelle Monáe just had that visual album. But yeah, whenever I actually get to teach this, I guess it will have to be the music of the moment. But I think, yeah, in any case, it will be nice to be able to talk both about like low level things like musical structure and how you pair that with visual imagery and how those two things are related and like processed physiologically. But then, yeah, these higher level like the meaning side of things, and like how we impose structure on content and like incorporate, yeah, what you're saying, like political themes and all this sort of stuff.
Hmm. Super cool. Will you have the chance to do any teaching in Germany, or is that just a research position you're going into?
It is just research. So the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics is funded by the German government, basically, and so it's not a degree granting institute. It's purely a research institute, and they have
Gotcha.
like music, neuroscience, and linguistics.
G-
Um,
Gotcha.
there are universities in Frankfurt, that, obviously like grant degrees and would have undergrad classes. And I do know some people at the Institute that have taught a course or two. So maybe it would be possible actually, but
Uh-huh.
certainly not like in my first year or, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I will be excited to teach eventually, but I think also right now I'm really looking forward to having this dedicated time to focus on research.
Yeah. Yeah. And which of your projects are you like focusing on right away when you go there? Is it one of the ones you described just now?
Yeah, partially. So the absorption stuff that I was talking about, we're still continuing that. And we also are holding 2 years ago, we had for the first time a conference on music and eye tracking. Because not very many people do this sort of stuff, but there are maybe like 100 people globally that do. And there's not any conference for that. Like there's a conference for eye movements and there's a conference for music cognition. And there's, like some cognitive neuroscience conferences or cognitive psychology, but you never really have all the music and eye tracking people in the same place. So the idea was to have this small conference at the Institute, and it went really well. And we ended up publishing a special issue in a journal with research from the conference. And so my first year that I'm there, we're going to hold another one of those conferences. So that will probably, just kind of continuing the absorption stuff, getting settled, figuring out like there's also another eye tracking and EEG, like scalp electrodes project that I have with someone there. So there's a fair amount to do upon arrival, but I think after that there's definitely some freedom in like where I choose to take things, and also some really cool facilities. So the Institute has like a 60-person concert hall that's set up for data collection from everyone in the audience. So like things like skin response or
Wow.
even EEG. They have like mobile EEG sets, and a few years ago we were trying to do some mobile eye tracking in the concert hall. So hopefully it would be possible to continue that. And there's a company in Berlin called Pupil Labs that is interested in collaborating with us on that. And I have a few pairs of their mobile eye tracking glasses, and they're still like actively developing those. So we'll see where things go. But it would be kind of cool to do like a really massive like group experiment where you have just like a whole audience wearing mobile eye tracking glasses while listening or watching a concert,
Oh,
and
yeah.
look at like how these movements are synchronized across people, or using the eye data to predict the structure of the stimulus. Like I have all kinds of sort of big ideas, but we'll see what
Right.
can happen.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, 60 people all plugged in with those measures. That would be a huge group, right?
Yeah, yeah, and no one has done anything like that yet. Some people have done some EEG, like massive, EEG collection like that. No one's done it with eye tracking yet. It's a little there's some studies on like watching movies, but
Hmm.
yeah, not like everyone at the same time, right? Usually it's like you do one person at a time and compare across people like what's similar, but to have everyone watching, listening at once, this would be kind of cool.
Thanks, everybody. Tune into our next episode. Who knows what's coming next, but it's going to be good. And keep an eye out for Lauren on her website. If you Google Lauren Fink, there's all kinds of cool stuff and exciting projects.